Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be another Canadian Soldier Reacts video, and today we're going to be looking at D-Day, since the 80th anniversary of D-Day just passed. Now, if you've been with the channel for a while, you will know that I am a member of the Royal Canadian Regiment. I was a serving member between 1987 and 1998. I retired as a master corporal and a section commander. It's important to note before we start that the Royal Canadian Regiment, according to our own operational history page, was not actually part of the landings on D-Day, as far as I can tell. The Royal Canadian Regiment was placed on active service on the 1st of September 1939 and moved to Great Britain 18th of December 1939. And on June 14th, 1940, went into France. We were also part of the landing in Sicily on the 10th of July 1943. So the Royal Canadian Regiment was operationally active long before D-Day, and actually in the fighting long before D-Day. And if you want to look at more of this, just search for the Royal Canadian Regiment, and you'll come to this wiki page that's here. But with that in mind, and knowing that my regiment wasn't there, I'm still a trained infantier and a veteran of the First Gulf War, although I didn't see anything like this, so I'm not making any parallels here. So let's take a look, and let's talk a little bit about what I want to do. Is I want to give you kind of an inside view of what would have been happening and what these guys would have been going through from a soldier's perspective, because a lot of the perspectives that you get are from a historian's perspective or a civilian's perspective. I want to tell you from my point of view, from what I know, how things actually would have been going on, and what the soldiers would have been thinking and going through at that point in time. So let's look at it.
I'm Murray Brewster. CBC was
So
there the moment Allied troops...
That first one that you saw looked like, well, it was at least a company, if not two companies, of soldiers. Although it was my understanding that most of the landing craft were much smaller and older, only held a platoon, which was 32 to 36 odd people.
stormed the beaches of Normandy.
This is Matthew Holton of the CBC, where our assault formations are ashore, and now fighting like wildcats to hold the bridgeheads.
In the decades since, we have documented the eyewitness accounts of hundreds of veterans.
Well, I tell you, I was quite scared.
That's important. Every single one of them would have been scared. If you're not scared, there's something wrong with you. I've said this before. A lot of people have said this before. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to do what you need to do, even in the face of fear.
Our team at the National has spent weeks combing archives to find rarely seen images and to bring you voices now silenced by age.
I can just shut my eyes and bring back the time.
The experience...
It's always interesting to watch. You see these older gentlemen and what they look like now, and you know that these guys were the biggest badasses of their day. Like I don't think there's a comparison from what these guys dealt with to what the vast majority of anybody ever has to deal with today.
Experiences of those who were there.
I mean, look at that. He looks like a fresh-faced, geeky little kid, right? But those guys were tough.
Now restored.
Most of us were violently ill.
In order to take you on a journey back to a critical moment,
I get seasick
when
really
the fate
easy.
of the free world hung in the balance.
So this guy is, well, that's a master corporal rank. I can't remember what the Air Force calls them. This is an Air Force uniform. So that would have been the same rank as I was, except I was infantry.
It is getting harder to keep history alive.
I feel very humble being here because I seem to represent most of the old soldiers now.
There are only 90.
That's an Army cadet. Actually, that looks like the cadets that we had in London, although
200 Canadian Second World War
there might
and
be,
Korean
I mean, they
War
might be the
veterans
same all
left
over
alive
Canada,
to
I'm
tell
not
their
sure.
stories. One of them, John Preece. He fought in Europe in 1945 and feels the burden of
I
history.
don't even know what those medals
There's only
are.
a few left, and I don't feel old, and I feel like all the other guys. And now I wish all my buddies were here.
But at last it started. The enormous bombing and shelling of the coast defenses. We came in from the sea that morning with a terrific volume of firepower.
Yeah,
5:10 a.m. The gun
5:10 a.m. So, by this point, they had already been warned off one day due to weather. They were supposed to go in, to my understanding, and if I've got something wrong, let me know in the comments down below. To my understanding, they were supposed to have gone in on June 5th, but they were delayed due to weather. And this became a double-edged sword for them because on the one hand, it helped them because the Germans, because of the bad weather, the Germans were not expecting the landing, but they got a small gap where they figured that they could get in. But the weather was still not good, and it hampered the naval landings, it hampered the aerial bombardments, and it hampered the airborne drops. So there was a lot of chaos created by the weather that wouldn't have been there if they had better weather. But like I said, double-edged sword, because the Germans weren't expecting them to land because of that. It could be argued that there were less defenses in place or ready defenses in place. So, it's hard to tell.
guns of the Royal Navy battleship HMS Warspite were the first to fire. The pivotal battle, the beginning of the end of Nazi Germany, was underway. Along the misty French coastline, 156,000 Allied soldiers prepared to rush an
156,000. Just for comparison, there are less than a third of that in the entire Canadian Forces, all three branches, Army, Navy, and Air today. And 156,000 landed on that beach that day.
underwater
I believe 14,000 of them were Canadian.
gauntlet of mines and booby traps, and to charge the German guns, fortifications, and barbed wire. They landed in daylight at 5 beaches. Hours before, Allied paratroopers had dropped behind enemy lines. The 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, 14,500 strong, went into Juno Beach with 5,000.
So I think the 3rd became the PPCLI, but I could be wrong. I could stand to be corrected on that. So this looks like 5,000 infantry, but there were a lot more than that.
assault troops and 2,500 in the initial waves. Those who were there
That's just the
remember
infantry
morning as cloudy,
in that division.
raw, and sullen. 6 a.m. The first wave of the Queen's Own rifles piled into their assault boats.
So I know guys from the Queen's
A
Own,
lieutenant
actually.
at the time was with them. He spoke to CBC in 1984.
It was about a 2-mile run into the coast. And we spent
A 2-mile run, and they'll be under fire that whole time.
those 2 hours bobbing up and down in these little boats, and we had seasick bags. So I suppose
Oh, I get sick.
in a way it was a bit of a blessing because our minds were taken off the reality of landing on a beach by being ill, being very sick.
6:15 a.m. The assault boats
Everything's a
began
mixed
long,
blessing.
slow journey to the beach amid heavy seas. Captain Eddie Goodman of the Fort Garry Horse Regiment led a Sherman tank unit ashore. He spoke to CBC in 1994.
Sherman
was a
tank.
mixed mood.
That was our state of the art for Canada back then.
Some people were exhilarated, quite a few. Some people were pensive and thoughtful about what they were going into.
8:02 a.m., the North Shore Regiment of New Brunswick landed at Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer, while at 8:05
I grew up in New
a.m.,
Brunswick.
just to the west, A and B companies of the Queen's Own Rifles touched the beach at Bernier-sur-Mer.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it here just for a second, and I want to show you something, because this is kind of important. So this is a map. This is Google Maps. It's a map of the beaches that they landed on. So they landed in a 5-mile stretch somewhere around here. So just, I mean, if you take a look, if we come out here. So this is just about where Juneau was. And if you look at this, the coastline averaged about 3 to 400-ish meters. So it's about a quarter mile the entire way along. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the beach defenses on D-Day, you'll see there were wooden posts. These were called hedgehogs, and you'll see more of them back here. And then there was these Belgian gates, 10-foot high steel frames topped with anti-tank mines. Then you had more posts with anti-tank mines. So basically anything that touched these things, they would blow up. The hedgehogs, again, to stop tanks, and then more mines. So the Germans apparently laid 6.5 million mines along the Channel coast. Then you had the concrete seawall with barbed wire on top. Now, what they're not showing here, and then the cliffs behind it, and then the pillboxes covering everything. And this, from here, this line here to here, you're looking about a quarter mile, 400 odd meters. And what they're not showing, and I've seen in several of the videos, is there were also barbed wire emplacements here along the sand. All of this meant to slow the troops down so that the pillboxes could take them out. Now, the aerial bombardment was meant to take the pillboxes and whatever defenses were up on the top. It was meant to take that out, as well as the airborne landings in behind. So the airborne hours earlier had landed in behind these things, but none of it went well. Very few of the objectives that they had intended to take actually got taken, at least in the initial stages. So when these guys landed, trying to section attack up 400 meters of this in front of them with enemy fire from above coming down onto them, it was a meat grinder. And if you've ever done a section attack, the thing that we always get taught is up he sees me down, dash down, crawl, slice, observe, fire. So you're literally for 400 meters on your belly. You get up, you run 3 steps, you dive back into the dirt, you roll or crawl a little bit to one side or the other, hoping that you lost the guy who was tracking you up in those pillboxes. And then you come up, see if you can find something to fire on, fire, and then do it all over again. And you have to keep going. Now, I've seen in a lot of these videos that these guys didn't quite do that. I think they did a lot of just straight running, trying to get to that seawall and the relative safety of that, because they had to get up and take out these pillboxes, because these pillboxes were just destroying them. So the amount of, and all of this is with at least a 70-pound pack, plus all of your rifle ammunition, mortars possibly, radio possibly, tank. They had some sort of a grenade launcher, anti-tank grenade launcher type of a system. These guys were carrying so much on their backs, trying to get 400 meters, a quarter of a mile. A nearly impossible task. So let's go back. With that in mind, now let's look at what the footage actually showed.
Lance Corporal Rolf Jackson was with B Company when the ramps went down.
So
He spoke to CBC.
I see this a lot. I don't know whether it is because that's how they pronounced it in World War II or whether it's because the announcers don't know what they're talking about. It could be either one, but we always named our companies Alpha Bravo, Charles Delta, Echo Foxtrot, all the way on up. Although they would have been slightly different. The phonetic alphabet was slightly different back then. I don't know that they would have called them A and B companies. They might have. I just don't know.
CBC in 1998.
I was hit and knocked off my feet. This would be within 15 feet of leaving the landing craft.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, right? You've got that quarter mile of that landing craft, but those are machine guns up there. They're not meant to be an accurate weapon. They're meant to be a volume of fire area suppression weapon. So they're hitting the landing craft probably another quarter mile out, and they don't really need to hit it. They just need to spray. And they're just getting lucky with hits, and they got lucky with a lot of hits. There's a lot of guys out there and a lot of bullets coming in.
And when I came up out of the water, there wasn't many of the section left. The section of 10 men, 7 of them were killed before they got out of the water.
All too common.
In the skies over Normandy, squadron leader James Stocky Edwards, one of Canada's highest scoring aces, was looking down from the cockpit of his Spitfire.
The water was very rough down there. They were putting people off in when it should be shallow and deep, and they're going underwater with the tanks and troops.
And you got 70 pounds on your back?
But other than that, there were lots of good things, and the landing was a success. But there were a lot of suffering from it.
A lot of hard work and a little bit of luck.
8:05 a.m. Canadian troops reported being under intense fire, with the Germans lobbing 60...
So they're like 2 to 3 hours into this by this point. They haven't gotten a quarter mile up the beach in the 2 to 3 hours that they've been doing this.
15 shells a minute onto Juno Beach. Major Charles Dalton was also with the Queen's Own Rifles and landed directly in front of a concrete bunker. He spoke to CBC in 1984.
The man on my right was hit 6 or 7 times in his left arm, and I was not hit. If I had been in his place or a little closer to him, then I would have got those bullets down the center. But I did not get hit until I got to the wall. I got all the way in. But everybody to my right was a casualty one way or another.
Wow.
Almost half of Dalton's company was lost coming across the beach. The Queen's Own took the highest casualties of any Canadian unit on D-Day, 143 dead and wounded.
Wow.
In a fit of daring,
That's
a handful of Queen's Own
nearly
made their way
half
up
the
beach
dead.
and around behind German defenders, driving them back from the shore. It was largely the same story all along the Canadian beachhead, with the Winnipeg Rifles, the Regina Rifles, and the North Shore Regiment of New Brunswick clawing their way forward with tanks and artillery supporting them.
The guts that it takes to do that.
Bernier-sur-Mer was cleared. Local
I mean, it's
residents who had been
miraculous.
sheltering in their homes during the Allied bombardment and fighting were overjoyed. They showered the Canadians with food and apple brandy, known as Calvados. Along the Orne River and the Caen Canal, Canadian paratroopers fighting with the British 6th Airborne guarded the eastern flank of the invasion against a German counterattack. Despite being scattered all over the drop zone, the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion cut the bridges at Verivale and Robillon. Sergeant Merv Jones spoke
Yeah, anything to
CBC
stop
in
the reinforcements.
1964 about the jitters of his nighttime jump.
Well, I tell you, I was quite scared. And I even asked the jump master at the specific time if we could change places. But we'd been so trained
That's
in
a
this
joke.
light business, red, don't go, green, go, that he says, oh, no, don't worry about it. We haven't got time to change you. That when the red, green light did come on, automatically, due to my training, out I went.
Oh, look at that, a dirigible.
11:45 a.m.
A
As
lot of
captured
them.
This rare color footage shot on D-Day, the 3rd Division deployed its reserves, infantry, tanks, and artillery in a second wave.
Yeah, by this point, the beaches are generally cleared. So, you know, obviously a lot safer to get in at this point.
It was the job of HMCS Algonquin and other Allied warships to keep up the bombardment on surviving German fortifications, some of which didn't surrender until late afternoon. Further out in the English Channel that day, Alex Polowin aboard HMCS Huron.
Now our job, like many people pointed out to me, well, you guys were lucky. You bombarded the coast and then you left. Nothing like that. No, we were in the channel about 7 months. Our job was to protect the people that were going in for D-Day.
Yeah, so he's right, actually. Protecting the channel was paramount, right? I go back here to the map. If you take a look at this, when you come out here, if the German forces, because like at that point they were like here, maybe, in fact, not even, maybe they were like, we didn't hold a lot of ground at this point. If the Germans had been able to get in behind them and cut them off at the beach, if the Germans had been able to take this channel, that's it. We were done. So yeah, the Navy and the Air Force still had an absolutely massive job to do.
Ships, their boats that were there, that was our job. To find the enemy ships that were doing that, that were coming down to do that. We did, we prevented them.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
To evacuate the wounded.
Because we would have lost without that.
By the end of D-Day, Canadian casualties totaled 1,096, of whom 381 were killed in action and 574 wounded. A far cry from the 1,800 casualties Canadian military planners had expected.
381 dead out of 14,000. And that was almost miraculous.
German commanders on the ground had warned beforehand the invasion would have to be crushed on the beach. Hitler, believing Normandy to be a feint, refused to release his panzer divisions until late in the day. An advisor to German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, Admiral Friedrich Rug, says by then it was too late.
Yep.
Rug spoke to CBC in 1984.
Yeah, oh wow, that's the German. If we hadn't been able to cut off those bridges and then get defensive positions in place along the natural obstacles, the Panzers would have just been able to roll right over us.
The battle was lost. You see.
When?
At once. As soon as a third front started forming.
5:30 p.m.
I didn't understand what he said.
Counterattacked. Although bloodied.
5:30 p.m. So they'd been there for 12 hours by this point, and they had just done some of the most intense fighting that you will ever hear of in your life. And they're still not done.
The Canadian lines held. It was a taste of what was to come. In the weeks that
let them get dug in.
Turned into a killing ground. It took over 80 days for the Allies to break out and then sweep northeast through France, Belgium, Holland, and into Germany, helping to deliver a death blow to the Third Reich.
80 days in that little semicircle. I think they moved out east and they took the peninsula, I think, because there were some really important ports up there that they needed to get. And they brought in, I believe, 2 floating ports, or moved in 2 ports of their own, temporary ports. But if they hadn't have been able to have that resupply, 80 days in that little pocket, oh my God.
By sunset on June 6th, Lance Corporal Rolf Jackson of the Queen's Own could look back at the beach and see the price of the victory to come.
I watched my sergeant, a Jewish lad, Freddie Harris, first out of our craft, never got out of the water. Johnny Gibson, my corporal, never got out of the water. Fred Eamon, rifleman, never got out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that right there, and this is the kind of thing that the Germans were looking at. And they had machine guns that were surrounded by concrete, and they had a little, like, I don't know, 6-inch to 1 foot opening where the machine gun was sticking out of. It was a shooting gallery. It was so easy for them, and a defensive position, right? In general, you like to have 3-to-1 odds when you're assaulting a defensive position, but in a case like this, where they're so entrenched, and they've been there for what, 5 years at that point? 5 years they'd been there. They were just ready, right? Or at least more ready than we wanted them to be. There was a lot of work that went into, kind of getting their attention elsewhere and moving troops to other places. But I would not want to be a man, 1,000 men trying to get up this with those machine guns trying to shoot you. Oops.
Ted Westerby, never got out of the water. John Kirkland, Boynton, neither one of them got out of the water. Doug Reed, my number 2 on the gun, never got out of the water. Al Kennedy, we got Bren Gunner, never got out of the water. Doug Reed's brother, the 2 of them are buried in 6 feet apart at Benny Samar at the cemetery. These people are, these are only my guys, my tent.
80 years later, a final salute. John Priest.
A lot of people lost their lives, but
atop the gravestone of General
it was needed.
Harry Crerar, who led the Canadian Army during the campaign in Northwest Europe.
This is too much. It takes me back to the old days. I think all these guys here. Don't forget. So many of them I knew. And many of them weren't much older than me, in those days. We had young men.
The average, they said the average age of the soldier in Vietnam was 19. I think the average age of the soldier in World War II was less than that. I've heard story after story of kids lying at 16, 17 years old to try to get in. I know I was able to join, I think I was 18 when I actually started the process. I was 19 when I actually got in. So yeah, a lot of young guys doing some pretty impressive stuff. And when you see it from, the point of view of the soldier, it's even more impressive. These guys, I think we owe everything to these guys. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. I think 5% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed to the channel. It would really help me a lot if you could subscribe. Leave a like on the video. Leave some comments down below if you liked what I was saying. If you think I got something wrong, let me know. And tell your friends about me. Help me grow the channel, guys. So thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.